I've lived in a lot of places that made noises. Thin-walled apartments with neighbors who fought at midnight. A studio over a bar where the bass thumped through the floor like a second heartbeat. Even a cabin where the roof popped and sighed as the sun went down. I've always told myself I'm not one of those people who jump at every creak. Houses breathe. Pipes complain. Wood remembers storms you slept through. So when I say I ignored the noises in my basement for a long time, I'm not saying it to sound brave. I'm just being honest. You tune things out after a while. The brain is a champion at deciding what doesn't matter. This house, well, the house I used to live in, was a little brick place at the end of a quiet street. Good trees, a porch that caught the evening breeze just right. I bought it because the basement was perfect for storage. Concrete floors, half-finished walls, a workbench from some previous owner with a jar of rusty nails frozen into a lump of old varnish. It had that cold, chalky smell basements always have. I liked that about it. It felt like a deep breath on a hot day. The first time I heard the noise, I had just moved in and was half asleep on the couch surrounded by boxes. It was late, and the TV had drifted to that soft hiss channels use now when nothing's on. It came from below me, a little shuffling sound, like somebody rubbing sandpaper on the underside of the floor. I listened for it the way you listen to a mosquito in a dark room, head tilted, breath held. The sound faded and I let it go. House settling, I decided. Air in the ducts. I wish I could say that the second time got my attention, but it didn't. I heard it when I was making coffee on a Saturday. Same small, scratchy drag from the basement, like the edge of a cardboard box being pulled across concrete. I actually smiled because for a second I thought, man, maybe I should go down there and find the box with my can opener. That's how little it registered as important. I poured my coffee and went out front to wave at the mailman like a person who has no idea the ground under his feet is a story waiting to bite him. The noises were never loud. They were slate gray sounds, not black and white. Easy to ignore. They came and went. Sometimes weeks without them. Sometimes I'd hear 2 in a day. If I'd been the kind of person who keeps a journal, I could probably draw you a map of those sounds. How they cluster after rainstorms. How they stay quiet when the furnace runs. How they sometimes show up precisely when you've forgotten they exist. But I didn't keep a journal. And anyway, it all seems important now because of how it ended. Not because of what it felt like while it happened. Months went by. I hung tools on the pegboard in the basement, labeled boxes, even strung up a line of cheap bulb lights, so I wouldn't have to rely on the lonely pull-cord lamp over the stairs. I made that place mine. I got used to the way it pressed coolness into my skin when I went down to get a ladder or a winter coat. I got used to the noises too. If it was a creature, I figured it was a mouse. If it was a pipe, then okay, a pipe. The house was 70 years old. We all have our little aches. The first time I noticed the smell, it barely roughed the air, like a whiff of something gone sweet in the trash a day too long. I'd left a bag at the bottom of the stairs when I missed garbage day, so I blamed that. Took it out, set the can at the curb, came back in, and the faintness was gone. Problem solved. Except a smell doesn't really disappear. It hangs onto corners and waits. You move the obvious thing and it shifts, not gone, just not bold enough to argue with you yet. The next week, my friend Nate came over to help me put up shelves. He's one of those people who walks into your house and can tell you which door sticks before he tries it. He knows wood, knows the sound a level makes when it rests right. We were in the basement for an hour easy, talking nonsense, drilling, making a mess of sawdust that felt like the right kind of mess. He didn't say anything about a smell. I didn't smell anything either. I'm not telling you that to convince you I'm not stupid. I'm telling you because the truth is slippery like that. You can walk right past a thing when it isn't ready to be seen. That night, it was back. Not enough to make me gag, but enough to give the air a sour curve. I opened the little window at the top of the foundation wall and left the basement door open to let the house lungs do their work. I Googled basement smells like something died like you do, and I got a bunch of checklists. Check the floor drain, pour water in the traps, look for wet drywall, mold, old apples rolling under racks, dead mice. I ran through them one by one. Floor drain looked fine. I ran the laundry sink and poured bleach down there because that's my default. I did something move. The smell backed off, and I declared victory. Another few weeks. More of the same. Life, work, the comfort of routine, nights on the porch, a thunderstorm that sounded like it was rolling a piano down the street. During that thunderstorm, I heard the noise again, different this time. Not a drag, not a scratch. A knock, like someone rapping one knuckle lightly on the underside of the kitchen floor. Knock. Pause. Knock. Knock. I froze with a glass in my hand and felt ridiculous. "Hello?" I called, and half laughed, half choked on the laugh because in saying it, I made a shape for something that had been shapeless. I stood there, listening. Nothing. Then a minute later, that sharp little stink, like a refrigerator left open too long. I put the glass down and didn't look at the basement door. I didn't want to give it the satisfaction. The following morning, in the clear light of those cool hours before the day remembers to be hot, I went down. I took the flashlight even though the bulbs were on a switch now. I checked the corners, the shelves, the boxes. I knelt by the floor drain and shone the light inside. Water was there, a slow, dull mirror. No hairs, no slime looped on the grate. I got up to go, and I swear to you, clear as my name, I heard a tiny sound behind the workbench, like pressure releasing from a jar with a loose lid. I whipped the light over, felt stupid again, and saw nothing but the wall I'd always seen. Cinder block painted beige by someone who thought beige could tame concrete. You start bargaining at that point. New weather stripping. More bleach. Maybe I'd get a dehumidifier. I put one in my cart online. Read reviews where people named the smell they were fighting like you name a hurricane. Then close the tab because I didn't want to be the person who buys a machine to fight a ghost. I put it off. That's the honest truth. I had money for it. I had time. I put it off. It was the heat that changed it. July rolled in and sat on the roof like a fat cat. The air went thick and felt unfamiliar in my chest. Basements in winter feel like a promise. Basements in summer feel like a warning. I came home from work one day, and the house had that stale, sealed-in thing it gets when everything's shut, and the thermostat is losing an argument with the sun. I headed for the basement, because I kept the cheap beers down there. And halfway down the stairs, it hit me. There are a dozen words for bad smells. Rancid, rotten, gamey, sour. But what came up to meet me on those steps was heavier than words. It was a physical thing, like opening an oven and catching heat full in the face. It had weight. It had shape. My body recognized it before my brain did and tried to turn me around. My eyes watered and I didn't want to admit why. Drain, I told myself, voice small. Drain, drain, drain. I kept going down because part of me is stupid like that, and part of me was afraid that if I went back up and closed the door, I would never open it again. My hand on the railing left sweat on the wood. The light switch clicked and the buzz of the bulbs felt loud. I stood at the bottom and tried not to taste the air. The smell was everywhere now. I could feel it coating my tongue, slipping behind my nose like something alive. A practical voice in me, maybe the last good thing I'll ever hear from myself, said, "Look for something obvious. Don't panic." So I scanned the room like I was checking out of a motel. Boxes, shelves, workbench, water heater, washer, dryer. I stepped toward the floor drain and saw a small dark smear on the concrete I hadn't noticed before, like a scuff mark dragged in an arc near the base of the stairs. I followed that arc with my eyes and realized, for the first time since I moved in, that the wall under the stairs wasn't the same as the rest. It was newer. The paint was the same bad beige, but the texture was wrong. The cinder blocks in the rest of the basement were old and pitted. These were smoother, with mortar lines that looked careful. Too careful. The kind of careful that wants to be normal and doesn't quite get there. I don't know what gave way first, curiosity or dread, but I found myself stepping closer, looking for seams, for anything. The smell was worst here. It pressed against me. I set my hand on the wall like I was going to apologize to it, and felt a flutter through the concrete. The faintest vibration. Not a sound. More like the idea of a sound. I went upstairs, got a hammer and a chisel from the junk drawer, and came back down because I had decided that whatever was behind that wall was something I needed to see with my own eyes. I don't recommend that thinking. It's the kind of thought that turns a lot of people into statistics. The first chip of plaster came off easy, and that scared me more than if the wall had fought me. When I cracked the mortar line, a wet burp of air slid out, and I actually gagged and dropped the chisel. It clanged on the floor in a bright way that didn't belong in that smell. I stood a minute, swallowing, eyes stinging, and then I went at it again, because there's a stubbornness in me that doesn't understand mercy. The hole grew. Bits of beige dust covered my hands and stuck to the sweat there. I widened the gap enough to push with the heel of the hammer, and the block loosened like a tooth. When it came free, the wall seemed to sigh. The pocket of air that rushed out hit me so hard my knees went soft. I stumbled back, bent over, and then forced myself to look into the dark. My flashlight cut a mean slice through the opening. It showed me plastic first, thick and cloudy, duct tape crisscrossed like a net. There was a shape under it, and my brain tried to make that shape into something harmless. A bag of rags, maybe. My light moved. Another shape. 2. My mouth opened by itself. I didn't make any sound because I didn't have air anymore. I don't know how long I stayed there, frozen. Just a body with a light and a smell. I remember the sharp thought that I should not touch anything, like a teacher's rule, bright and simple. Don't touch. My phone was in my pocket, thank God. I found it and I dialed 911 by muscle memory. I don't know what I said. I remember the operator's voice, cool and human and shaped like a lifeline. I remember saying, "In my basement," and I didn't do anything, which I knew sounded like the worst quiet man's lie. She asked for my address twice. She told me to go upstairs and wait outside if I could. I went. Every step up from that basement felt like climbing out of the ocean with all of it trying to pull me back. I sat on my front steps and watched the heat stutter over the street while I listened to sirens winding themselves toward me. I tried to memorize the ordinary things: the tassel of the maple tree, the paint chip lifting from the porch rail, the neighbor's garden hose curled asleep in the grass, because I knew the ordinary would be gone once those lights turned my house into a scene. They arrived in a quiet rush. One police car, then two, then a van, then an ambulance, though no one was going to the hospital from my basement in any direction that made sense. They moved like they'd practiced moving, and I stood when they told me to, and answered when they asked, and handed over my keys. They wrapped yellow tape around my porch as if it could keep anything in or out. A woman with a clipboard asked my name. A man with kind eyes told me to breathe through my mouth. Someone else told me to sit. I sat. I watched them go in, and I watched their faces when they came back out. That's when I knew that what I had seen was exactly what I had seen. You can argue with yourself about smells. You can bargain with scratches in the night. You can't misread the way a cop looks at a house after he looks at something terrible inside it. They asked me to come down to the station. I said yes, because what's the alternative? I didn't ask if I could call anyone. I didn't think to ask for a lawyer, because the part of my brain that makes smart choices had been left down there on the concrete with the limp roll of duct tape and the ache of mortar dust in my nose. They didn't handcuff me. They didn't have to. I went where they pointed and sat where they told me. The interview room was like every interview room you've seen in a movie, but smaller. The walls were the kind of clean beige that makes you feel dirty just by breathing. A camera blinked at me from the corner. Someone brought me water in a paper cup that made the water taste like cardboard. They asked me to walk through my day, then my week, then the past year. When did I buy the house? How did I find it? Who did I buy it from? Did I do any renovations? Had I had any disputes with anyone? Did I have any friends who used my basement? Did I have a girlfriend? Did a girlfriend use my basement? Did I hear anything? Did I smell anything? Did I check the basement regularly? Why did I decide to break into the wall? My answers were boring and true. I told them about the noises like a person confessing to not rinsing dishes. I told them about the smells in a way that made it sound like I'd done everything I should have done, which I hadn't. I told them about the block that came out easy, and I watched the way their pens moved at that. At some point, they read me my rights in a voice that sounded weary rather than menacing. That's when the idea that I was a suspect switched from something I had been keeping at arm's length to something that sat down next to me and put its hand on my shoulder. I asked if I could go home, and they said not yet. Time is strange in those places. Sometimes it's a cinder block, cold and heavy, and sometimes it's water you can't hold. They left me alone, and the air conditioner hummed and stopped and hummed again. I looked at the mirror because that's what you do, as if you'll catch the room wincing at its own reflection. I sipped my water to do something that wasn't breathing. They came back with updates like weather reports. We've got people going over the scene. We're going to be a while. We'll be right back. Hours folded in on themselves. My chest never settled into a rhythm that felt like me. They asked me the same questions in different words. I gave them the same truth in different shapes. I could hear myself getting smaller with each answer. The next morning, though it could have been 2 mornings later for all I know. They told me they had identified the victims, a man and a woman. Their names were just names to me. I had never heard them. They told me the man had been declared missing 3 years before I bought the house. The woman had been reported missing around the same time, but from a different county. I watched their eyes when they told me that, searching for whether I looked like a person who knowingly bought a house with a secret grave. Here's a detail I keep returning to. The detective with the kind eyes, the one who told me to breathe through my mouth. He put the names on a little pad of paper and turned it so I could see them. And as he turned it, I watched him brace for me to do something like reach for the paper or deny the reality on it. I didn't do anything. I just looked and felt a weird, shameful relief that the names meant nothing to me. I felt relief because it meant I wasn't the monster they were going to try to paint me as. That relief made me hate myself because it existed in the same room as 2 people who had been plastic wrapped and tucked into a wall under my stairs. What they never said out loud was obvious in the way everything moved around me. I was the prime suspect because I was the only suspect. It was my house. I had found them, which to them meant maybe I knew exactly where to look. The wall was new. I had been living there long enough to be comfortable and careless. It fit a story they liked. People always like the story that has a tidy circle to it, the snake eating its tail. They kept me for days. While we gather more information, they said. I slept in a cell that smelled like disinfectant, that had lost the fight. I learned the rhythm of a building that never sleeps, but never wakes up either. My life narrowed to a slice you can't taste. My phone was taken. My keys too. My house not my house anymore. I tried to tell myself that if they had anything real on me, anything at all, the tone would change from polite to sharp. It never did. It just stayed gray. A public defender came to see me. He looked younger than me and had eyes like he needed more water. He told me not to talk anymore without him there. He asked me gently why I didn't ask for a lawyer sooner. I told him that I thought telling the truth was the thing people who had nothing to hide were supposed to do. He smiled in a way that wasn't unkind and said that was true in theory and occasionally helpful in practice, but also that systems eat theories for breakfast. The thing that saved me in the end wasn't eloquence or charm or even the truth as I told it. It was time. The coroner's report, when it finally came, put the deaths well before I signed papers, well before I toured the place with the real estate agent who chattered about good schools and left out anything about secret rooms. The duct tape, they told me, had a kind of adhesive that hadn't been manufactured in years. The plastic sheeting showed a brand that went out of business before I met the person who sold me the house. The knots on the tape had traces of skin cells that didn't belong to me. The oldest kind of proof. This couldn't have been you because you weren't here yet. They had to let me go. That's how the detective with kind eyes phrased it. We have to let you go for now. The for now lodged in me like a splinter. I asked if they had any idea who did it. He shook his head in a way that told me they had ideas they couldn't turn into a net. We'll be in touch, he said. And the thing about cliches is that when they're all that's left, they feel like promises. Walking out of that building, sunlight hit me like a challenge. The world had the nerve to continue. Cars went by with their own dumb errands. A kid on a bike tilted his head to drink from a bottle and rode one-handed like a stuntman in a movie about nothing. I had nowhere I wanted to go. My home was a crime scene they were done with, but I wasn't. I got a ride from the public defender because I didn't know what else to do. He'd seen people worse off than me. Eyes that talk to corners, arms that shake with the story the body can't hold. But he let me be quiet without punishing me for it. When I unlocked my front door, every part of the house moved in a way that felt unfamiliar. Chairs seemed like they were sitting where they sat for someone else. The kitchen smelled like bleach and oranges, in a way that told me cleaners had been here. They'd left a card with a number if I had questions about remediation. The basement door was closed, and I knew I would never open it again. Neighbors, who had liked me enough to wave, now liked me enough to stare. I could feel their glances through the blinds, and it made my skin hot. You don't come back from people learning your name on the news paired with the words, "2 bodies found." Even if you're not the bad guy, you're still the story. And nobody wants to be a story that moves into their street. I tried. I lasted a week. I slept with the TV on to drown out any real sighs of silence. But sound doesn't fill a hole like that. Every smell in the house was wrong to me. A banana too ripe, the wet towel I forgot in the washer, the ghost of bleach, the memory of everything. I caught myself swallowing air not because it tasted good, but because I needed proof it was still there. So I moved. It was quick, too quick, according to my realtor. But sometimes you have to leave before you can think about leaving. I packed my life into cardboard that doesn't care what it carries. I paid a crew to do the heavy lifting because the thought of going down those basement stairs to fetch the ladder made me shake. When I closed the door for the last time, I put my hand on the wood and said, "I didn't know." I don't know who I was saying it to. The house, the people in the wall, myself. The new place was smaller, a rental, split level, bright, the kind of beige that hadn't found its way to worry yet. I told myself it was a chance to start over. The landlord was a retired guy with a sunburn and a fondness for telling stories about fixing things with the wrong tools. He assured me the basement was dry. "You'll like it," he said. "Plenty of space." I didn't go down there on the first day, or the second. Boxes could sit where they sat without hurting anyone. I arranged the upstairs into something like a life. Dishes, towels, a coat rack. I slept like people do in unfamiliar places, shallowly, with one ear open, with a map of the room turned on behind my eyes. A friend took me out for pizza the following Sunday. He waited until the second beer to ask the questions he'd been holding back, and I answered them like a person who was trying to help a friend help him. We talked about the investigation, like it belonged to a show we both watched and had opinions about. He told me time would help. I told him time had been the problem. We laughed a little at that because when you've been scared long enough, laughing feels like proof you still can. On the ride back, he said, "You shouldn't let this turn you into a person who never goes into basements." I shrugged. "You first," I said. We both smiled. It felt good to smile at something that wasn't a lie. He dropped me at the curb. The evening had that pink haze where the day is trying to apologize. I carried the leftover pizza in, set it on the counter, and told myself that this was a normal Sunday. I even turned the radio on low. A song I used to like came through the speakers, surprising me. I opened a cabinet and reached for a plate. The cabinet door squeaked in a way I found charming, because it belonged to a new story, not the old one. That's when I heard it. From below me. Software A. Small, scratchy drag across concrete. The edge of a cardboard box being pulled, slow and patient. I stood as still as a person can stand without falling. I told myself it was pipes, a furnace, the house settling, a mouse, anything, everything. I told myself all the old reasonable things because I wanted to keep the world. The radio carried on with a cheerful, unbothered rhythm. The plate was still in my hand. I realized my grip had gotten so tight my knuckles hurt. I set the plate down. It clinked. The sound felt loud and inaccurate in the room. I licked my lips because that's what people do when they don't know what to do. The noise came again. Not loud. Not a bang or a scream. Just a shape rubbing against another shape in a way that said intention, not accident. I took a breath and felt my heartbeat in my gums. I could smell nothing unusual, and for a terrible second I was grateful for that. As if lack of smell could trade places with lack of danger. I walked toward the basement door. There's a little half hall behind the kitchen where the door is, painted the same kind of hopeful white landlords use because it looks clean, even when it isn't. I put my hand on the knob and thought about the detective with kind eyes. I thought about the names he wrote down. I thought about the beige wall under my old stairs, and the way the block came loose like it wanted to. I thought about how I had promised myself I would never again, not ever, go into a basement alone. My hand tightened on the knob. The radio played something I didn't know. The house breathed. From the basement I heard another small sound,